Hello and welcome to video 4 in this series on summarising the evidence around effective professional development. In this video we will continue with recommendation 2, and in the previous video we looked at building knowledge and motivating teachers as our mechanisms. In this video we're focusing on developing teacher techniques and embedding practice. So this third group of mechanisms is related to developing teacher techniques. So after building knowledge and then being motivated to act upon it, these techniques provide us with the tools required to take action and change our practice. And the review underpinning the guidance identified 5 mechanisms that develop teacher techniques, which are instructing teachers on how to perform that technique, arranging social support, modelling the technique, monitoring and providing feedback, and rehearsing the technique. And we'll take a look at these. This is just something to consider in terms of mechanism 6 and mechanism 8 when you are designing professional development. And this quote from Kennedy is something that you might want to reflect on. Pause the video for a moment to read it. So Kennedy is discussing here the notion of teachers having their own systems of practice, and it's an interesting idea to unpick how much of teachers' own conceptions of their own development are explored and made explicit. And the quotation reveals how complex teacher improvement is. So it's just something to think about. It's the tricky part of professional development, the idea that we work outside of the classroom to improve what happens inside of the classroom. And it enables us to think about what we can do to help teachers really see what it would look like in the classroom with their pupils. And this idea of we are at risk of what she calls the problem of enactment, where we can get teachers to learn an idea and be conversant with an idea, but actually then they might continue to enact a completely different idea out of habit. And changing habits of practice is probably one of the most challenging things for professional development. So one of the ways we might help teachers with this is modelling the technique, so providing some kind of observable performance that they can reflect on or that they can imitate in some way. And this deals with this outside the classroom versus inside the classroom situation. If you have tools such as Iris, you might want to make use of those, especially when using it as a more reflective tool. So it might be that you can have banks of modelled practice for a particular professional development activity that you're undertaking, and teachers can use the reflection tools on Iris in order to further understand what is being modelled to them. So if we unpack these mechanisms a little bit more, we start with the instructing teachers on how to perform a technique. At the centre of any professional development programme, we're likely to have delivery of well thought out and clear and guided instruction. And this mechanism was found in almost all of the studies in the underlying review. So an example of this in practice could be a professional development programme supporting Key Stage 2 teachers to improve their maths teaching that explains the concepts and procedures needed to teach better maths, including instructions on how to use manipulatives and representations, how to teach the strategies for problem solving, how to use assessment to build on understanding. The next mechanism is arranging social support, and this can be offered via a range of methods. That might be providing a coaching relationship where an expert coach provides support and assistance. It might be a conference call between teachers participating in a professional development programme where they can discuss challenges and progress. Or it could be the requirement that 2 teachers from your school participate in a programme together so that they can support each other throughout. The third mechanism is modelling the technique, and that's an observable sample of performance, either directly or indirectly, for the teacher to reflect on or imitate. So it might be watching exemplar videos of teachers using that target technique or principle. It might be going to watch an experienced teacher deliver an example lesson. It might be to do a learning walk. And learning from these examples provides opportunities for teachers to observe problems and their solutions before they face them themselves. So it's not necessarily about providing the perfect example. It can be about providing an example that poses a problem and they can then work out what they would do differently. Providing monitoring and feedback is the next mechanism. So numerous reviews demonstrated the variable impact that feedback can have, but on average, it's associated with a positive effect on performance. So this might be written or verbal feedback to the teacher, and also covers feedback on practice. So the questions that a teacher asks, for example, as well as feedback on performance, and that might come from the response from the students. This is about supportive observations with formative feedback, and it needs to be clearly differentiated of the notion of high stakes lesson observation linked to appraisal targets. That's not what this is about. It's about that formative feedback. So the final mechanism in this group is rehearsing the technique. That practice needs to be prompt as soon after the professional development session as possible, and needs to be a rehearsal of the technique at least once. So training teachers outside of the classroom might support them in enhancing their skills, but the actual rehearsal of the technique helps towards embedding those habits. So with these first three themes, we've given teachers the knowledge, we've motivated them, we've given them the tools and techniques. But we need to make sure that that improved practice is embedded and it lasts more than a couple of weeks. And this is where we come on to the fourth group, which is about embedding practice. So professional development needs to support teachers to do this so that they can continue to change their behaviour and improve their teaching. To support teachers to alter and improve their practice, we may choose to provide a series of prompts and cues which nudge and remind them to carry out certain behaviours that will lead to improved outcomes. So this might include regular contact during ongoing professional development, perhaps to remind them about gap tasks, or after the professional development to check participants are using the lessons that they've learned. The next mechanism is prompting action planning, where a teacher plans how they will perform a technique, and that might also include lesson planning about how to apply it in a series of lessons. So it might be the final activity in a series of training sessions on, for example, improving secondary science teaching. Participants could be asked to review the lessons they'll deliver in the next week and identify where they can use models to help pupils develop a deeper understanding of scientific concepts. So it's about that longer term application of their training. The third mechanism about encouraging monitoring is where we're talking about self-monitoring. So this isn't you monitoring, it's about the teacher monitoring themselves. Professional development might be more effective if it includes methods whereby the teachers can monitor and record their own performance, or perhaps even use reflective journals, so where they record the actions that they're going to take towards a specific goal and reflect on the success of them. It might be that they use a tool like Iris to record themselves and then use the feedback tools on there to put reflective comments down and share those with other people that they're working with. The final mechanism for this group is prompting context-specific repetition, and this involves teachers rehearsing and repeating that behaviour in the same context as it would usually be delivered. So here we're talking about taking it from inside the training to inside the classroom. They repeat that action at least twice, and that shows that it can support embedding of practice. So you might want a strategy such as a 30-day pledge, where you ask people to try this strategy out for 30 days and then feedback to you what difference that has made. And it gives us the nudge to keep trying that strategy. So that's the mechanisms in the 4 groups, but does it matter which groups are included in the professional development? The authors of the review underpinning the report suggest that a programme with mechanisms from each of these areas represents a balanced design. If one or more of the groups is missing, the programme may fail for a particular reason. So this table in the guidance report is a summary of the review's hypotheses about how professional development can fail if any of the 4 groups or 4 purposes are not tackled. For example, in this first row of the table, if professional development brings about changes to knowledge, motivation, and techniques, but doesn't embed this in practice, then teachers will tend to revert to established ways of working and revert to old habits. In the next row, if professional development brings about changes to knowledge and motivation, but not techniques, and doesn't attempt to embed change in practice either, then the insights might never be translated into classroom practice to begin with. So they might have the knowledge, and they might be motivated to do something, but they don't know then how to do it or enact that in the classroom. And what we get there is the knowing doing gap. The next row shows an extreme case where professional development brings about changes in knowledge, but not in the other groups, in which case teachers leave that professional development without intending to change their practice. The next row shows the example where we have professional development that has really motivated people. It's given them some techniques, it's shown them how to practice that, but without providing an understanding of why and when perhaps a particular practice is effective, it can lead to misapplication of a technique in a way which renders it completely ineffective. And we sometimes call this a lethal mutation. We're not saying that something that has all 4 groups is definitely going to work, because obviously that depends on the quality of what's being provided and the content. But the review did find early tentative evidence that effective professional development programmes may be more likely to include a mechanism from all 4 of the groups. It's tentative evidence. There needs to be more trials of balanced professional development designs for us to be able to be more confident that balanced designs are superior. But at this stage, we say in the report that those who design professional development may aspire to include at least one mechanism from each group. Balanced design doesn't mean you need the same number of mechanisms from each group. It just means there is at least one from each of those 4 areas. And in the report, you will find this case study of a programme which has a balanced design. So something to think about following this series of videos is a programme that you know well, or that you've designed, or that you've taken part in, whether it reflects this balanced design, and if not, which area or areas are missing and what impact might that have had, and how might you do that differently in the future. In our next video, we're going to be covering the implementation aspect of this guidance report in recommendation 3. Thanks for listening.